Hello there, travelers! Welcome back to another installment of Grugthegrung Stories and More, where we offer repose to the weary and glory to the brave. I am Grugthegrung, and this tranquil place of rest is the pond. In recent news, I have familiarized myself with the RPG Stories industry standard, and I couldn't be happier about changing my video format. So, from now on, somewhere in the video, I will be featuring the accounts of the brave adventurers that have provided us with their tales of horror and glory, if I have permission from them, of course. I will be trying different things for a while to see what works best, so please bear with me. For our first story of today, we have the tale of Reddit user Evil Tiny Wolf who poured their time and dedication into a game of Pokemon TTRPG. All for a player to brush it off and write down nothing that happened in the game. Now sharpen your pencils, print out your character sheets, and without further ado, roll post! This is the ballad of my first time attempting to DM a game. About 10 years back, my boyfriend, now husband, hey congratulations, wanted to get me into D&D. I'd had a very negative first experience to the game, so he coaxed me into it by introducing me to his college's D&D club as he played a Pokemon tabletop game. The game was largely homebrewed and horribly broken, but the whole club followed the same rules. After being a player for a few games, I felt confident in running my own. I drew my own maps, created my own central hub city, and had a running joke plot about the mayor being unable to build a Pokemon stadium. The players had been summoned by the city's professor who needed research assistance that could act as communication with one of her excavation teams as he worked in an area with no cell phone signal. Before the game started, I made spreadsheets to track the party's money and their character subclass options. For the most part, the game went great. Since it was my first game, I limited the game to 4 players. My boyfriend made a juggler, and the others made a martial artist, a photographer, and a breeder. Breeder was my favorite to play, and I'd personally made multiple characters with various subclasses. So I was very familiar with the class and how the class worked, so in the early levels I helped her with the class and backed off when she seemed to have the hang of it. I was sadly not aware that this particular player would end up being my problem. The breeder in my game was the only other girl in my group. I ended up finding out that because she had been the only girl before my arrival, she was very used to special treatment. Special treatment that she had just assumed I would give her too. The Pokemon tabletop game we used had an interesting method of handling experience points. XP was given as 2 separate numbers. Trainers got character XP, which would level up their class, and you could pick which order subclass skills were learned. Pokemon got XP that the trainer could divvy out whichever way they chose. So you got a total number, but if that number went all to one Pokemon or got split up, was up to the trainer. You could theoretically use one Pokemon in a fight and give all the XP to another one that wasn't in combat. Breeders got a percentage boost to Pokemon XP to help level up babies faster, and how much of a boost was dependent on which subclass features. As stated above, I had a spreadsheet where I kept track of which subclass options the party had been picking. Whenever I told the party their XP, I had a separate number I was telling Breeder based on which options I knew she had. I'd mostly been tracking this information so I could make sure I was leaning into the skills the party had shown interest in. Juggler wanted to do more damage based on which type of Pokeball he throws. Had a shopkeep who could craft Pokeballs from acorns and randomly set up areas on the map where acorns could be found. Photographer wants to learn moves he's captured on film. Professor helps him upgrade his camera in downtime so he can develop film faster. Then came the final fight. I'd been dropping hints about the 2 Team Rocket grunts the party had run into multiple times. My boyfriend and the martial artist appeared to be the only ones who had figured out the duo were a red herring. Martial artist used his character knowledge to speculate his theory to the party that one of the grunts had a powerful psychic-type Pokemon. First round of combat, Breeder threw out a level 1 bug type she'd hatched on the way to the encounter. The whole table was horrified. We hadn't had any combat since the egg had hatched, so it was definitely a level 1 and its only stats were what the Pokemon starts with plus her breeder bonuses. But it was the final fight and she insisted she'd rolled really well on her bonuses, so I assumed she'd made a glass cannon. The party got hit by a few attacks, but they had been healing so the players staying up didn't seem too odd. But the level 1 staying up was a red flag. I asked to see its sheet. She tried to deflect saying he was low but still up. and tried to refuse. The refusal was a bigger red flag, so I got up from my seat and went to her side of the table. What I saw killed any enjoyment I'd been having from this session. Her sheet was blank. Entirely blank! As were a few of her other sheets. Her own character sheet hadn't been updated in several levels. Probably not since I'd backed off from helping her with the class. Came to find out that she had stopped tracking anything months ago except to add fun things to her inventory. She'd heal when she felt it appropriate or would let Pokemon be knocked out when she thought it would make sense, but hadn't been writing down health, XP, or even her own character abilities for months. She wrote stats of level ups with everyone else and just never wrote them down. No one had ever checked her character sheets before, so I was the first DM to ever look at any of her sheets after the first session of character creation. In front of the club, she had just admitted this was the first game where she had actually written anything down on her character sheet past getting her character approved. She just brought extra sheets of paper with her to sessions so she'd have papers to rustle through behind her screen during combats. The only thing she'd ever reference was the subclass options. Since players were allowed to pick what order they gained skills, she would just pull whatever sounded beneficial to what was currently happening. As long as it was a skill from her class or subclass, no one had ever questioned it before. I ended the combat there, gave an epilogue that was functionally a bad ending. Party got to still beat the bad guy, but at a horrible cost. After that, she hated me. In every campaign she was in, she had DMs suddenly checking her sheet at the beginning and end of every session to make sure she was actually keeping track of health and consumable items. She blamed me for the new problems she was having after years of playing with the group without any issues. Boyfriend upgraded himself to fiancé and eventually convinced me to run my campaign again with an entirely different group. I moved the game to online so I could see character sheets, and fiancé stepped up as co-DM since he already knew the main story beats. He helped with combat encounters, which allowed me to go further gremlin mode on my spreadsheets. I made most of the spreadsheets visible to the party so everyone could see what information was being tracked. I finally got to do a happy ending to the campaign, and one of my players liked my story enough to do a spin-off sequel where her character from my game had gone on to become a professor, and we all made characters who were the trainers she was now mentoring. The professor from my game even got referenced as being consulted for advice at a few stages. And she showed no special treatment indeed. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but for those who don't, if you want a game with minimal rules and requirements, there are tabletop games out there in which you don't have to keep track of a single thing. And in fact, some where there are no actual fights. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but the point is, everyone is making an effort to play a game that is balanced and fair for everyone. Whether we like it or not, this requires a certain level of responsibility that everyone must uphold. The majority of us are guilty of not writing down crucial information provided to us by the DM. That one very important NPC whose name we don't remember, or the place we had to take the newly retrieved relic, but not even writing down or updating information that pertains to your own character and fudging battles for the entire campaign is disrespectful to everyone at the table who have dedicated their time and effort, especially the DM who helped you polish your character sheet so you could be good to go. Well, I think for a lot of us, we can use this as a wake-up call and write down the bartender's name that will soon be revealed to be the babyyy all along. Am I right? On the bright side, hope you unlock the good ending, and bless you guys' hearts, I am happy for you too. I wish you a very happy marriage. Moving on to our next story, Reddit user Agent Aquarius speaks of a problem player that tries to Mary Sue their way through a campaign by retconning their character's backstory to suit their needs. Row post. Synopsis. Rando tries to play an edgy PC who also has a rich family history that lets them auto-solve any encounter. The PC picks their battles poorly and dies in the finale after the GM loses all sympathy. This event happened in mid-2020. Our group's forever GM wanted to playtest the third-party urban fantasy setting for D&D 5e. A mutual friend and I both agreed to join. The GM posted an LFG online and found 2 more people, one of whom was the problem player. That person played a Hexblade Warlock, so I'll call him Hex. Here's a summary of the adventure's plot for context. Our party of 4 was a group of stage performers who got caught up in a freak storm on the road and got sent back in time 30 plus years to the late 1980s. This incident was tied to a ritual performed by a group of RPG playing teens in the earlier time period. The teens summoned the Devil 4 power to fight against commercial construction threatening their families' homes and businesses. The party's main goal was to find a way back to the present before the timelines disentangled themselves. During the investigation, the party discovered the motivations and conflicts driving the NPCs and could choose to help, hinder, or ignore. In Session 0, the group established that Hex's PC had a background as a diplomat. However, as soon as the adventure was underway, the idea got shunted aside as Hex proved himself unable to stick to a consistent personality. What we got instead was him bouncing between different flavors of edgelord, churlish, aloof, and gloomy. Upon realizing he was in the past, Hex immediately said he was a time traveler to the first NPC he met. When they reacted with skepticism, he decided to gather information more subtly about eldritch beings, which only confused the NPC. Hex tended to jump to conclusions from a single clue and sometimes with no clues. He would then ask another PC for their opinion on the subject, only to double down on his hypothesis if we suggested anything that wasn't in direct agreement with him. Later in the investigation, after the party fought off a shadowy assailant, Hex whined about the encounter to a friendly NPC. When he was told this put them on edge, he continued to divulge the party's discoveries and made the NPC even more frightened. On 2 occasions, Hex challenged an unfriendly NPC to a duel. The first time was a preppy jock who called Hex out for flirting with the jock's girlfriend. The second time was a police captain after the party found hints of a conflict of interest. In both cases, Hex was outclassed and knocked out. The second incident would have killed him had another PC not intervened at the last moment. Hex also flip-flopped with his view on money. In Session 1, when the party rolled into town and checked into a motel, Hex said he just needed a closet to sleep in. Oddly, this was just before the PCs realized they had to be conscious of how much period-appropriate cash they had on hand. The very next morning in-game, Hex insisted on overpaying and tipping big to impress people, including buying a fine suit and getting it tailored. He justified this with a good connection isn't a waste of money. This included flirting, which led to the jock encounter mentioned above. The setting included new spells to interact with digital networks, so the GM allowed the PCs to plug in personal devices inside their tour bus to access a cached version of the internet. Hex tried to exploit this to get rich by looking up lottery numbers, stock prices, and collectible toys. This would be clever in a long-term campaign, but he paid too much attention to it for a playtest, and prioritized it over searching for plot-relevant information. Hex's most aggravating behavior was retconning his PC's backstory for each new challenge, then claiming he should be able to solve the problem without needing to roll the dice. The GM was often willing to negotiate, but wasn't afraid to put his foot down when Hex reached too far. Need to talk to an important local figure? Hex was from a family of noble diplomats which gave him lots of money and connections. Need to investigate construction plans? Hex's family ran an island resort and taught him business and architecture. Found evidence of drugs? Hex's family owned a pharmacy and taught him medicine. Need to deal with police or criminals? The family and their business were organized like the mafia and helped authorities chase other crime syndicates off their island. You found evidence of demons? Hex's ancestors were demon hunters who passed down a powerful heirloom he wielded as his pact weapon. Also, it had the power to steal souls, and his mentor's soul was trapped inside of it. One scene in particular best illustrates Hex's wishful thinking in getting the best results with the least effort. He had a one-on-one encounter with a lesser devil who had possessed one of the teens involved in the summoning ritual. Hex wanted to do an exorcism, but he didn't have any leverage to compel the fiend, and using force would risk the girl's life. Instead, they made a deal where Hex had 24 hours to sacrifice a life. In exchange for the lesser devil agreeing not to harm its host, Hex immediately tried to find someone whose death would have no consequence to the town. But the GM told him both in and out of character that such a person wouldn't be walking around in the open. Hex kept rephrasing his question each time the answer wasn't to his satisfaction, dragging out his solo scene. The GM had to trick Hex into choosing a target by pointing him to a house that looked lived in but run down and cluttered. While snooping around, Hex was cornered by an inhabitant. He took the kill, then discovered his victim was the parents of one of the other teens. Of course, Hex protested that this wasn't what he wanted. though the GM pressed on by pointing out context clues relevant to the main investigation. In the adventure's finale, the party had to complete a ritual that would both open a time portal and banish an eldritch being that was trying to manifest. During the fight, Hex took a big hit that dropped him to 0 HP, and the GM said that the creature's special ability ripped out the target's soul, killing them instantly. The party finished the ritual and leaped into the portal with Hex's body in tow. The GM concluded the adventure with a sequel hook. The surviving PCs discovered they jumped too far forward in time and were now in the late 2050s, while Hex's soul was tethered to the ritual site. The GM later admitted to me that he misread the enemy's stat block, and it needed another turn to soul steal a down PC. But he thought Hex's conduct didn't deserve rolling back the mistake. And now, a brief epilogue. The GM, bless his heart, wanted to give Hex another chance as a player. We didn't want to invite Hex to our usual RPG group, so the GM sent out another LFG and set up a Discord server for a separate group of online players, which included Hex. The GM had written a homebrew setting for a semi-aquatic world and wanted to do a dungeon crawl based on an AD&D module, so he ran the adventure for both groups in parallel. One event I was privy to is that Hex and I were the PCs in our respective groups to grab a cursed sword that grafted to the wielder's arm, making them constantly hungry but to be able to taste whatever the blade cuts. At one point, Hex posted an OOC complaint that the other player's PCs distrusted him to the point of wanting to cut off his arm to remove the sword. My guess is that Hex played to the curse as an excuse to rock the boat for the other players. Our group completed the dungeon crawl and went on to do some further world building, but the other group barely finished the dungeon before the GM nuked the Discord server. Well, I can't say that Hex's demise wasn't deserved, but... No buts. He had it coming. How can you have so little regard for the game that you make up stuff on the go and just generally fail to follow the plot? We all sidetrack, that's for sure, but as a group, not selfishly looking up lottery numbers for your own gain. It's fine to try to get rich, dude, but don't biff your way through the game. You're supposed to be McFly. Anyway, back to the merry suing. It's fine if your character doesn't know how to do something. That is how the game is supposed to work. Your character excels in one field, sucks at others, and your fellow players fill those roles in which you suck. Except for bards, of course, because they are just oh so perfect. But hey, even bards have their weaknesses. Hey bard mains, how's that strength score coming along, huh? But seriously, where's the fun in half-assing a game? If you're gonna try to have fun, at least put some effort into it. And by the way, making deals with devils and mercilessly murdering people? That sounds like an evil character to me. That will be it for today, folks. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope your rest eyes have treated you well. If you have enjoyed yourself here today at the pond, feel free to drop a like, comment, and follow the channel for more stories to come. Good luck out there, adventurers, and remember to update your sheets. May your paths cross again.